Chapter 10A. Despite advances in filmmaking technologies, the style of storytelling, the classical Hollywood narrative style, was still the standard for the American industry. A reminder of what that means. All story elements are resolved in less than 2 hours. Criminals are punished. Mysteries are solved. Questions are answered. What we might refer to as traditional is the classical Hollywood narrative style. Successful directors from the 30s and 40s continued to be successful, and new directors who had been praised in theater and now television also did well in Hollywood. Genre films continued to flourish, especially westerns and film noir, as well as musicals and comedies. In the period of the 1950s through 1970s, some film directors cultivated the image of an auteur, like the author of a novel or a composer. It suggests that all of the creativity has flowed out of one brilliant mind and is not the result of a collaborative process, even if the director wears many hats: director, writer, actor, and/or editor. The addition of color film enhanced existing storytelling techniques, but did not change the way stories are told. Makeup entrepreneur Max Factor worked to make on-screen makeup look more believable. It could be more subtle than the old smell of the grease paint of the theater world. Those making films for the big screen were encouraged to take advantage of the latest gimmicks, such as 3D and widescreen, whereas those making films for TV had to scale down what would play on a smaller screen. Storytelling now had to accommodate interruptions. Today, it has to tolerate multitasking. Some directors tried to add new techniques, such as the jump cut, to their style, especially after seeing it done in European films. But in general, the studios were afraid of risking money on anything the audience might find too idiosyncratic or weird. The 1950s were a time when the old guard of directors, Cecil B. DeMille, Frank Capra, William Wyler, were not only still working, but putting out their most memorable films. DeMille's The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston is still shown on network TV at least once a year, usually around Easter. And Wyler's Roman Holiday introduced the world to Audrey Hepburn. But a new generation of directors also made its mark during this period, none quite like Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense. He was very prolific with a new film every year or every other year, and he found ways to experiment with technique without upsetting the studio. The 80-minute continuous take in Rope may not have been the most successful thing to do, but what is called the vertigo shot in, obviously, Vertigo, had a huge impact. This is also called a dolly zoom or a push-pull. The camera is zooming in as the dolly tracks backward, so the foreground remains stable while the background expands backwards. Each of his films did something to tweak at the traditional style. In Rear Window, the audience can only see what Jimmy Stewart's character could see from his wheelchair, and we, the viewer, share in his frustration. In Psycho, he turned the classical Hollywood narrative style on its ear by killing off what looked like the lead character, played by Janet Leigh, in the first 20 minutes of the film, by what really was the lead character, Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, in that infamous shower scene. Hitchcock was also very successful with his television series, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which lasted 10 years, first on CBS, then on NBC. But it wasn't all about Hitchcock. The Western gained extreme popularity during this period, especially after the development of color film. Howard Hawks directed John Wayne in 3 films: Rio Bravo, El Dorado, and Rio Lobo. Unlike Hitchcock, Hawks never deviated from the classical Hollywood narrative style. Instead, he made archetypal films, as in the films that set the standard against which others could be compared. An infallible sheriff, a mysterious lady who is new to town, a handsome sidekick, a comic character. Other directors of the time cut their teeth in filming for television. Sidney Lumet, known especially for adapting plays such as 12 Angry Men, directed Al Pacino in Serpico in 1974 and Dog Day Afternoon in 1975. And he directed Network in 1976 with the classic line, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." Stanley Kubrick really belongs in his own category. He was in the Hollywood mainstream in that his films were funded and released in theaters, but he was very independent, and his work pushed a lot of buttons. Paths of Glory, an anti-war film in 1957, released during the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings. Some would say daring, others would say ill-advised. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Stopped Worrying to Come to Love the Bomb, completely skewers the military-industrial complex. Lolita is an adaptation of Vladimir Nabokov's extremely controversial novel from the point of view of a pedophile. 1968's 2001: A Space Odyssey, filmed before the first lunar landing in 1969, was not the first sci-fi film, but is perhaps the first serious sci-fi film with philosophical questions. It set the stage for subsequent sci-fi classics like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Alien, and Blade Runner. A Clockwork Orange, also based on a controversial novel, looks at the use of aversion therapy on a sociopath in dystopian London. Doesn't that sound fun? And of course, The Shining, with Jack Nicholson as an off-season caretaker of an isolated hotel who descends into madness when he and his family are trapped in by a snowstorm. Kubrick did not limit himself to one genre of filmmaking and was not so concerned with their financial success, which certainly made him unique in the industry. Stanley Kramer invented the adult film. Not that adult film. What I mean is, his films could have complex themes to be discussed later. That film was not just for entertainment. His films like High Noon or The Defiant Ones showed that money could be made even when a film has a message.